Each one of us is different. We look different. We like different foods. We have different friendly bacteria living in our gut. Each person has different ones. So each one of us actually has different nutritional needs. And there are certain stages in life where we need to start thinking about what is it I need in order to, for example, build my muscles at this stage, or increase my immunity, or give me more stamina. And so what I'd like to do is to talk about how to eat for your age. And I've tried to put this into 3 blocks, if you like. The first one is school children, and it's lovely to see some lovely children in the room there. So we will talk about children's needs, growing children, then adult women, which will include a little bit on pregnancy. And then I'd like to finish with senior women who are, say, over 65, 70 and above. So I think that we'll try and cover as much as we can within 20 minutes, but we do have a little bit of time for questions. So please store those questions and we'll try and answer them later. So when we think about children, remember, this is a stage of a rapid growth and development. They need energy for running around, and they need enough nutrients and food so that they can concentrate and do well at school. And one of the main nutrients that I find children often, in fact, mums of young children find they struggle to get their children to eat, is protein, which might surprise you. Now, protein comes from milk, cheese, eggs, beans, fish, chicken, all those sorts of foods, dairy foods and meat products. And you need protein for growth of muscle, for muscle recovery, and for immunity. Now, how much protein should children be having? Well, for anyone, a good guide is to look at your hand. The portion size of protein you should have is about that. So think about it next time you have a steak. I think your protein portion might be a bit bigger with the steak, but that's the amount it should be. And the thickness, about the thickness of your hand. Now, when you think about that, a child is going to have a smaller hand and a thinner palm. And that's how you can gauge the amount of protein that they would need. And what you want to do is to make sure that they have protein 3 times a day. So at every meal, they need to have that level of protein. It also helps with immunity. So, okay, we've dealt with the skin and the muscle growth. What about the bones? Because those bones also need to develop and need to be strong. During adolescence, children will lay down around 50% of the adult skeleton. So they are developing really quickly, and they need to make sure they've got the right minerals and protein to make sure that they build those bones in the right way. And your bones are constantly being broken down and built up. Even yours, you are not sitting on the same bones you were about 5-7 years ago. And in children, that bone formation and breaking down happens at a much faster rate. So you need to make sure that there is a daily supply of bone building minerals that will help them get enough bone up until the age of 35. That's how long we need to be planning to get enough of those bone building nutrients. And the main ones are calcium and vitamin D. Now, you get calcium from dairy foods, milk, cheese, yogurt, and from many other foods like baked beans and figs, and from bones of the fish that you might eat, so tinned sardines or tinned salmon. But your body cannot make use of that calcium unless you have enough vitamin D. You could be storing masses of calcium, having huge supplements and everything, but unless you've got vitamin D, you won't be able to absorb that calcium. Now, where do you get the vitamin D from? Well, unfortunately, not much is available in food, even fortified foods. The main place you will manufacture vitamin D is from the sunlight. And I know we haven't had much lately, but when the sun is out, all of us need to make sure we are uncovered, maybe your arms, maybe your knees and your calves. Make sure you're uncovered so that you can absorb those ultraviolet B rays from the sun and manufacture your own vitamin D. It is really important. Obviously, we have to be safe. We have to use sunscreen after a while. But because we are dark-skinned, we need to be out in the sun even more. So for children, it's not really a problem. I'm guessing they're out a lot, but remember this throughout the life stages. And the other aspect for children is this energy levels, this sustainability of long periods where they may be running around and playing around, or they need energy and glucose for mental performance. Now, different foods will act differently in the body. If you imagine a breakfast of cornflakes, the cornflakes will be digested, your blood glucose or blood sugar will go up and it will go down, and the energy levels start to go slower then, less energy. But if you were to swap that cornflakes for porridge, you'll find the energy levels go up much more slowly. The glucose does not rise quite as rapidly or as high, and then it goes down nice and slowly. And these slow and steady rises in blood glucose or blood sugar are ideal for sustained energy, for concentration, for mental performance, for prevention of type 2 diabetes, or if you have diabetes, you certainly want to be achieving those nice, slow, steady curves. So it's the low GI or low glycemic foods that are important, and that's things like porridge oats, beans, dal, whole grains, nuts, fruit, and vegetables. And I've got much more of those tips on my website, asminanutrition.com, or on Instagram on @asminanutrition. So there's so much more I could say about children, but moving away from the food side, I just want to talk about the behavioral side before I move on to adult women. Children will learn more from what we do than from what we say. So it's all very well us saying, oh, have your vegetables, eat your broccoli, and, make sure you don't have too much sugar. But let's look at ourselves. So examine your own eating habits. And if you are eating lots of fruit and vegetables, if you're not having sugary, fizzy drinks and lots of chocolates and cakes, then that will be a habit that they can form at a young age. And other habits that are really crucial at a young age is to sit as a family at the dining table. Now, when my children were young, I used to give this advice, but it wasn't always easy. So I know I get it, that it's not always easy to sit together at a dining table. But when you can, eat with your children, especially as they get older, because you are teaching them to sit and be focused on that meal rather than watching TV or playing PlayStation or playing a video game or looking at an iPad and eating. Because when you are distracted, you tend to not focus on what you're eating. In fact, there are experiments where, two groups of people at different sides of an auditorium in a cinema were given popcorn. And one group was given masses of popcorn, much of it which was stale. And the other group were given less with a little bit of stale popcorn. And what they found is the ones who were concentrating and who had less actually ate less. And the ones who were so much focusing on the cinema, on the movie, didn't even notice that the popcorn was stale. But because they had big cartons, they got through it. And this is what distraction does, because you're not focusing on the amount, you're probably not focusing on the taste. So young children need to build this healthy relationship with food. And that relationship with food helps us throughout our adult life, because then you're less likely to use food as a crutch if you're stressed, or start to eat food when you're bored rather than when you're hungry, which is how it should be. So let's now move on to adult women. Firstly, if you're planning a pregnancy, I'm sure you would know that you should be having 400 micrograms of folic acid per day, and that would be a supplement given to you by the doctor. That's really important when you are planning a pregnancy. During the pregnancy, a lot of people come to me and say, well, I can eat for 2 now, so I'm going to really enjoy the chocolate digestives. Or did you know that 3 chocolate digestives will take 20 minutes of badminton to work off? And when you're pregnant, this is not about eating for 2 at all. In fact, you only need 200 extra calories when you're pregnant, 200, which is half a pint of milk. So you really don't need to be eating that much. But what's important is that those calories that you're having are used for the right purposes. And therefore, what we call the nutrient density, which means the number and type of nutrients per calorie needs to be higher. So you really need to be thinking about, am I eating nutritious food? Am I having my eggs, my cheese, my milk, my dairy? And if you choose not to eat plants, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later too. But you really need to think about every mouthful being nutrient dense. And during the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, that is when the fetus is developing the brain. And there's evidence to show that if you have omega-3 fatty acids, which you find in oily fish, like salmon and herring and mackerel and trout, that omega-3 fatty acid gets absorbed through the placenta to the fetus, and that helps the development of the brain. So it is really crucial for you to be thinking about what you're eating in order to have a healthy, normal child. But all adult women, this is a time of our lives when we're really rushing around and stressed out. You might have just got married, you might have a new job, you might be a busy professional, and you've got young kids. So this is a time when we really don't have a lot of time for ourselves. But it's so important not to get sucked into those faddy diets. And I know, because I do a lot of posts on Instagram, and I see so many lovely young women within our community getting sucked into these, the juice diet and the cabbage diet, and there was one lately, what was it, the golden syrup. And then there are some which have more science behind them, like the 5-2 diet and intermittent fasting. And then a lot of our women are going for gluten-free or dairy-free, thinking, well, actually, I'm putting on weight. I'm sure I've got an allergy to gluten. Well, unless you have been diagnosed with an intolerance or a sensitivity to gluten, you should not avoid gluten. You should not avoid wheat, because when you do that, you're avoiding the nutrients that are all in the wheat as well, the B vitamins, the fiber, the calcium. So if you think you have a gluten intolerance or a sensitivity, go to your GP and get it properly diagnosed. Similarly with the dairy allergy, which a lot of people come to me for. But the one that's had the most gravitas, if you like, and the one which has really good science behind it, is more and more young people, young women within our community particularly, choosing to eat a vegan diet or go towards more plant-based eating. I can remember when my daughter, she was 23, and she comes into the kitchen and she says to me, "Mom, I'm going vegan." And honestly, my heart dropped, because I have brought as a dietitian, I've brought my children up on a wide variety of foods, and, eat your meat and your fish and have all these different nutrients in different ways. And now she was saying to me, I'm not going to have chicken, I'm not going to have fish. Never mind that, I'm not even going to have dairy. And that's such a good source of calcium. So I must admit, I sort of went into a bit of a research frenzy. I was very worried, but I knew that at this age, I'm not going to influence her. She's going to do it anyway. So I have to support her in this decision. And so I researched and I met all the professors and I did all the writing. And in fact, it culminated in my latest book called Vegan Savvy. And I found that I wrote this book for her, and it's full of infographics. And as you can see, appropriate for that sort of audience, because it's simple, lots of graphics and very easy ways to understand nutrition when you transition from eating meat to having less meat and more plants. And what I noticed as I was writing this, because I was interviewing young women, and I noticed so many women within our community actually thinking, I want to go vegan, I want it to lose weight. Well, that's not a sensible way to do it. Do it because you want to embrace plant-based eating. And in fact, when you look at the research on plant-based eating, people who eat a predominantly plant-based diet, so whole grains, lentils, beans, dal, fruits, nuts, vegetables, seeds, they have a lower body mass index. They have less risk of, it's been associated with less risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke. It's basically linked to overall well-being. So I personally feel for all of us, it would make a lot of sense for us to cut down on the meat, not cut out, you don't need to cut it out, but cut down on the meat, cut down on full fat dairy, and start adding, for example, if you're making, I don't know, meat curry, have less of the meat and throw in a handful of dal. If you're making keema nusak, then think about having less keema and put in some frozen peas. That way, you're slowly transitioning towards eating less meat and dairy and more plants. And these plants, we all know about 5-a-day fruit and vegetables, but the benefits of plant-based foods with all the antioxidants for your immunity, for your bone health, for your eye health, for your skin, for your hair. It's so important for anti-inflammatory, to help to combat inflammation in the body and conditions like arthritis as a result of inflammation. So think about transitioning towards more plant-based eating, but do it sensibly. And that's why I wrote the book, because it isn't easy to get all your nutrients when you become, or if you decide to become vegan. There are things to think about with vegetarian foods. So for example, if you're eating, let's say, spinach curry and rotli, then yes, you've got some iron in the spinach, but if you choose to have a cup of chai with your spinach curry, then there's a substance in the tea that inhibits the absorption of the iron in the spinach. Basically, that means that when you have chai with a vegetarian meal, your body is not going to get the iron, no matter if you've got kidney beans and mung beans and spinach and all these beautiful foods that do have iron, your body will not be able to make use of it efficiently. And that's because of this impairment of absorption because of the tea. So what I suggest you do is wait an hour before or after a meal, and then you can have your cup of tea. And what I use in the book are what I call nutrient bridges, ways to bridge the gap. And one nutrient bridge for when you're eating vegetarian foods is to have a small glass, 150 ml glass of fresh fruit juice. And that can be a carton, it can be freshly squeezed, whatever you like, as long as it's unsweetened. And that has vitamin C, and the vitamin C chemically finds a way to unlock the iron in the spinach, in the kidney beans, in the mung dal, so that your body can make use of it. And these nutrient bridges are so crucial when it comes to getting all the nutrients that we need. And I've put it all in the book, and I also do this on @Azmina Nutrition. But I wanted to mention that to you, that it is a great idea to move towards plant-based eating, but you do need to think about where you're going to get your calcium, where you're going to get your iron. And we know that teenage girls, for example, and young women are generally, the National Diet and Nutrition Survey data in the UK shows that around 20% of young teenage girls are low in calcium and low in iodine, and you get calcium and iodine from dairy products. So when you choose to cut out dairy, you have to think, where am I going to get that calcium from? Now, cartons of soya-based, plant-based drink and oat drink, these are great. They do often have calcium, but you need to read the label, because the almond ones and the hazelnut ones and the coconut ones will not have that added calcium. Some brands may. And the calcium tends to go to the bottom of the carton. So my other nutrient bridge is always shake the carton before you're going to pour your plant-based drink, so you get calcium in every glass. And when it comes to eating generally for young women, in fact, for all of us who are of adult age, 19 to 64, I use this model with my patients and actually in all of my books, and I call it VVPC. It's a way of looking at your plate. So imagine you've got your plate of food there, and maybe you can think of a set of chopsticks across there. So you've sort of put your plate into quarters. One quarter is to be filled with veggie, one with protein, and one with carbs. Veggie, veggie, protein, carbs. So for example, let's say you're going to have a chicken curry. So the chicken is here. That's the amount, that's your portion size. And you might say, I think I'll have some rotli and some rice and some veg salad. So your rotli and your rice, because we tend to be very carb heavy in our community, you might have a potato curry and rotli, and then you might have some rice after that. Those are all carbs. So we need to think about the balance. That's about the portion size of the carb. And ideally, you should be having a whole grain carb, like brown rice, or rotlis made with coarse wholemeal atta. So then what about these two? A quarter you could fill with salad, or if you choose to make a dal or a binda curry, for example. And then you can imagine an after dinner fruit fitting into that quarter, like an apple, or a glass of fruit juice, small glass of fruit juice once a day is fine. And when I sort of suggest this to people, they find it's a really simple and practical way to ensure you're getting balance. Honestly, if you eat this way, you'll get more fiber, you'll get less saturated fat, you'll get the right amount of protein, and you'll make sure you always have some protein. You'll get whole grain carbs and closer towards those 5 a day fruit and vegetables. And that way of eating will help you manage your weight, reduce your risks of type 2 diabetes, help to reduce your blood cholesterol and your risks of heart disease. And because arthritis is an inflammatory condition, it is good and it is associated with reduction in inflammation. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm now going to move on to seniors in our community. And, I've been, talking to a lot of senior people in our community, and I notice, for example, that they may have something like soup and a slice of toast for lunch, veggie soup. And sometimes they'll just have a cereal for breakfast, and then they'll eat their main meal at about 4 o'clock, and that's it for the day. Now, this worries me. As you get older, number one, your appetite goes down. So there's less sort of room for those nutrients because you just don't feel like eating enough. Secondly, your metabolic rate goes down. And what's really important is the efficiency with which your gut absorbs nutrients and digests isn't as good. So whatever is on your plate, you're not even going to absorb as efficiently as you did when you were younger. And therefore, it's really important for the senior members to, if you can, eat 3 times a day and to have protein each meal. And remember your palm. So the protein amount of chicken or fish or egg or cheese or beans or dal is about that size, your own palm. And that will make sure that you maintain the muscle mass. You notice often here is where you notice, loose, I've got some myself, some loose skin here as you get older. Now you need to maintain the strength of those muscles. And in order to do that, you need to eat dietary protein 3 times a day. So really important for our seniors. And that calcium I told you about earlier with the vitamin D, we know as we get older, we're more prone to have fractures, more prone to falls. So again, really important to have the calcium and to make sure you get out into the sunshine when you can. A lot of our elderly are housebound, but even if you can open the window and, roll your sleeves up and get a bit of sun on your arm, even that will manufacture vitamin D. But more importantly, make sure you ask your GP if you can have a vitamin D supplement. And if he wants to take a blood test, it's very simple and it's not expensive, so they shouldn't complain. And you can have a supplement because that vitamin D is also going to help your immunity. And during the time of this pandemic, we do need to be thinking, especially of the elders, about how we can boost that immunity. So that vitamin D is actually more important than vitamin C. You think about vitamin C being the nutrient you want to think about, but actually vitamin D is really crucial. So I think that's the main things I wanted to say about the seniors. I really think, just to sum up everything, I just want to say that, food tends to be something that we use for enjoyment, and that's so important. We have to enjoy our food. But when you have this plate of food in front of you, think about, have I got some natural colors on there? Because those different colors will give you different nutrients that can help your eye health, your skin, your nails, every part of your body. So think, have I got lots of different colors? Think to yourself, have I got a protein in there about that amount? Have I got some whole grain carbohydrates, brown rice, brown pasta, beans, lentils, dals? And sit and make a meal of it. If we eat on the hop, if we eat while we're cooking and while we're rushing around, we're not conscious. Remember that emotional relationship with food is important. So eat consciously, savor the flavors, and teach our children to do that as well. Thank you.